May 1940, faced with a country gripped by paranoia, Prime Minister Winston Churchill ordered the internment of all German and Austrian citizens living in Britain. Most of these men, women and children were refugees who had come to the country to escape Nazi oppression. But now, in the midst of war, they were considered potential collaborators with the regime from which they had fled, and almost 30,000 individuals were arrested and imprisoned by the very country in which they had staked their trust. Status and class, the twin armaments of privilege, provided no protection. In the years leading up to war, Nazism had pushed a wave of luminaries towards Britain, and now these Oxbridge dons, surgeons, dentists, lawyers, writers and celebrated artists were all taken into custody. For example, the police arrested Emil Goldman, a 67-year-old professor from the University of Vienna, in the grounds of Eton College, England's most prestigious private school. And that year's Cambridge University law finals almost had to be cancelled because one of the interned professors had locked away the exam papers and taken the key with him. On the 13th of July 1940, the British government opened Hutchinson, one of 10 internment camps situated on the Isle of Man for the so-called enemy aliens. 2 days after it opened, some men emerged from the boarding houses where they were interned, carrying chairs and ladders, which they then set up around the lawn. They beckoned passers-by, and when each man had a small crowd, he began to hold forth on his specialist subject. And soon the lawn became filled with speakers and their various audiences, like, as one observer put it, a scene from ancient Athens. Bruno Ahrens, an architect interned in the camp who had lectured at the Bauhaus, formed a committee to draw up a schedule of lectures, and the British officer in charge of the camp, Captain Daniel, dubbed it Hutchinson Camp University. Campaigners for the internees secured books which they were then able to use to open an impromptu camp library. And there Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca proved to be the most borrowed titles. Professional actors and film directors who were interned in the camp began to stage productions of, among other things, A Midsummer Night's Dream and Of Mice and Men. And there were 3 art exhibitions staged in the camp where work created by interned artists was shown, including some by the celebrity Dadaist Kurt Schwitters. Despite the cultural richness in the camp, depression was rife, as men waited for news of their loved ones, obsessed over their businesses, worried over freedom, and carefully watched their fellow campmates for any sign of Nazi sympathies. Lest all this sounds too rosy a situation, one internee later noted, "Let me assure you that all this frantic activity was entered into as a means of distraction from the ever-present anger at the injustice, the constant worry about wives and children left without a provider, from the lack of communication, and of course, suffering from the cramped living conditions and the lack of freedom." The battle between a nation's responsibility to help those in need and to maintain national security persists in every age, every generation, every country. But the notion of a refugee who is not who he or she claims to be is a powerful story that can be easily used to justify institutional cruelty or overreach. And while the context and the detail shifts, each successive generation must answer the same question: how far can we go in the rightful defence of our values before we abandon them along the way?